Welcome to part 3. Now in this video I'm hoping to get the whole thing finished, but I can't promise that. Well, we'll see. Maybe I should back introduce this so I know how much I've done when I release the video. Anyway, we'll get the drum on it, we'll get the drum moving. But before I do that, I've got a little bit of adjustment to do on this table because the table is very slightly twisted. Now I didn't think my eyesight was good enough to see this, but I can see that that corner is lifted very slightly. Now before I show you just how this is twisted, I should point out, if you noticed this in the previous video, there is a diagonal brace on this. And this is because I noticed this twist when I was putting the top on. I didn't really cover it in the previous video. The brace has helped a little bit because it's pulled this a little bit flatter than it was. But what we have here is we have a table that is flat across all of the directions parallel to the drum. And it's pretty flat across that diagonal. It's possible there's a slight concave nature to it. I can't see any daylight, but the ruler does seem to be slightly proud in the middle. But this is most definitely convex. Now I've drawn a diagonal on here to make sure. Obviously this ruler's flexible, so when you're measuring it you need to make sure the ruler is straight. But I've put the diagonal on here and we've got a definite rock. It's out by maybe the thickness of the ply at this end, and I need to correct that because what it means, and again I've got to get this ruler straight in order to demonstrate this, is if we put the ruler in the middle where the drum's going to be, when I raise the table up, can you see that? There's a gap at this end here, and I don't want that. I can compensate for that gap by shimming the bearing, and the truing process of the drum may account for adjusting that to a certain extent. But I don't want to start off with maybe as much as a millimetre difference between these two ends, because I'm going to be I'm going to be sanding material that's as thin as 2 millimetres, and nearly a millimetre difference in the two ends is a huge difference. So yes, I can compensate that for how I mount the drum, but I think it's best if I get this table as flat as I can before we do all of that. So let's go do something about it. As well as the twist, I've also got this slightly raised here. I've got to just take a little bit out of the hinge cavity routing just to get this end sitting just a little bit lower. Just lost the screws inside my table saw. Screw number 2. But losing the screw in there has actually done me a favour, because have a look inside. There's a mass of dust collected around the blade, and the reason is down here. The hood around the blade has become disconnected from the dust extraction. Got to plug that back in there somehow. I don't think it's particularly easy. So the dust collection hasn't been optimal. By the way, this table saw is unplugged. Just thought I might point that out. Right, I think that is back in. So we need to clean this out, and hopefully we'll have better dust extraction, or dust extraction at all. feels better. I'm going to make sure I take material off at that corner. Right, I've taken that corner down and I've got a straight edge here, so I can reference everything now to those two edges. I need to take material about here to get rid of the hump in the middle. Yep, I've now got two straight edges. So I need to take some off this edge. Would appear to be flat. Yeah. So I've now taken material away from that corner and I have 4 straight edges. So I've just got a reference. Got to take the hump off in the middle. And I think we're there. Possibly I need to take a little bit more off this corner. I now have it flat in all directions, and most importantly flat on the diagonals. Yeah. Yeah, actually that is okay, maybe 0.1 of a millimetre. No, it's not low enough. Looks like I was fairly accurate in my measurement. That's a bit of a relief. Lovely. For the wiring scheme, I have an extension lead which I'm going to cut up, because I'm going to have a trailing socket which will operate from the switch on this device, and that will power the dust extractor, so the dust extractor is switched on at the same time as the sander. Obviously the plug is ready wired for me, so I just got to chop it up into 3 lengths and have a junction box mounted on the underside which goes both to the trailing lead and to the motor, and then obviously the other end is via the switch. Thought it might be easier to get this in before I strip the ends of the wires off, which I think it probably will be, if I can just do it. Yep. There we go. What we now have is switched power in, going to the motor and the dust extractor. And if I can figure out which way around to put this lid, I will do so. That way. This is an NVR switch, no voltage reset. It's like a little relay with a push button, and the idea is that if the power is removed, then it switches off. So when the power is restored, it's always in the off position when the power is restored. So I've just got to solder it in. I've got plenty of heat shrink. I've joined the earths together because there's no earth on this, and I think that'll be okay. I've put 2 lots of heat shrink over the top, and as long as there's room behind here, then it should be okay. That's the question: is there room behind here? I've got about a gap of about that much, so it should be okay. So I know that live goes to number 13, and yeah, I've got a problem with the holes on this. They're a bit small. This soldering iron's a little bit underpowered for this, but it's usually used for much more delicate work. I've done a lot of electronics, and this is years and years and years old. Decades old. It's important to make sure that the solder is properly wet. It's not working at the moment. Come on. There we go. It's a good joint. Can't now get the heat shrink around it. I was hoping to properly insulate this. Will it go? Just. I've shrunk the heat shrink a little bit around the edge because of the heat of the solder. Let me just trim that off. I love when I take my soldering iron out of its holder. You get that zing noise as if a pantomime character's walking on stage. Aladdin and his lamp or something. Genie appearing. Worth mentioning that if you want this switch to latch, you have to connect these 2 pins together. This is a control pin that you could connect to some circuitry within the equipment, and it can, as part of a safety function, kill the power. But here, because we want it to just latch in a very simple mode of operation, we just connect the 2 together. So this is the neutral pin on the switched side of the circuitry. So as the current is made, then power is supplied to this pin and it latches. So let's get this all put back together and try it. It's actually gone in quite easily. Very smooth and precisely thicknessed. Not the textbook way of doing this, but it worked. This is the bearing mount. This is what the bearing is going to get bolted to, and this is going to get screwed to the side of the sander. And to get the height of the drum right, here's a hardwood shim, and I want the holes to line up. So I've got that hole directly underneath the bit, so I just pop that in there. I'm going to hold that in place and drill. Simple. Time to admit a small design flaw. I'd put this cavity in here so that I can bolt through onto the mount here. This is going to get screwed onto the top, and we've got our shim and our bearing. And I'd made this just deep enough so that I can get a nut underneath. And I'd made it just wide enough to put a ring spanner in. But of course, if I tighten it all up, the ring spanner is going to become trapped, so I can't use the ring end of the spanner. I'm going to have to use the open end, so I'm going to have to widen it. Oops. This isn't final. I'm going to have to take this off because I'm going to have to set the bearing at the right position front and back, and but also I'll have to take it off to put the drum on. I just want to see how it looks. Well, I said I'd get the drum moving, and there it goes. I'd hoped it would be motorised, but next video, I hope the next video will be the last one. I said in a previous video that I was going to have a problem getting the axle through the bearings. In fact, all I did was clean the bearings up, not with any abrasive, just with naphtha, and took the burr off the end of the axle, and I've got a very small amount of play. Can you hear that? Just the tiniest amount, so I'm going to have to find something very, very thin, maybe sellotape, to shim the axle, just so I don't have any play. There are grub screws, but there are only 2 grub screws, and I don't want the grub screws forcing the axle to one side and creating more of an imbalance. If you see, there's a very slight imbalance in the wheel. Can you see how that's rolling backwards? So I've got some balancing to do. And I've got to true the drum. I've got some serious shimming to do there. That's really quite loose, but I have some thin sheet metal that I think I can just make a collar. So we're okay there. And got to get the fan belt sorted out. I've got to get the height adjusting mechanism. And for that, I've got this lovely adjuster off some machine. I don't know where it's come from, but I got this in my local second-hand tool shop. But I've got to build an arm for this because the end adjuster, it doesn't screw up and down. This is static, and this bit goes up and down. I've got to put the steel on the deck, and I've decided I'm going to use contact adhesive, and I've got to make a dust extraction hood for this because this is going to generate a lot of dust, and I want to be able to connect the dust extractor, which is underneath, onto a hood on top, and hopefully won't get any dust in the workshop. So that's all to come. That's in the next video. It's dark outside. I'm going to finish for the night. So see you soon.